It began in the grand chamber of the Galactic Union, a place so vast it could hold an ocean, and still echo with pride. A circular hall suspended above the misty rings of the planet Yeltir, where light from 3 suns streamed through crystal domes and painted the silver floors in endless colors. Thousands of alien delegates sat in their floating seats arranged like constellations, each species dressed in the robes of their empire, their eyes glowing in strange hues, their voices murmuring in the soft hum of translation machines. Yet when the high speaker mentioned one word, Earth, the murmurs turned into laughter, slow at first, then spreading like fire through dry grass, laughter so loud that even the glass walls trembled with it. They called Earth the forgotten planet, the cradle of chaos, the species that burned itself before reaching the stars. And they laughed because to them, humanity was not a threat, not a rival, not even a story worth remembering, only a symbol of failure. For generations, the galaxy had advanced while Earth had fallen silent. Their transmissions stopped, their colonies abandoned, their ships no longer seen beyond the solar rim. So the Union believed humans were extinct, wiped out by their own violence or trapped under the ashes of their dying sun. And it was easier to believe that than to admit fear of what once was. For once humanity had made the galaxy tremble, not with power but with unpredictability. They fought wars they could not win and still refused to surrender. They traded lives for seconds, tears for victories, and when they bled, they smiled. The galaxy never understood that kind of madness. So when humans disappeared, the Union built a myth to cover the unease in their hearts. They mocked what they could not understand. That day in the chamber, the laughter carried to every world, transmitted by the council media channels, played in news halls and comedy screens. The word Terran became a punchline again. They joked about the monkeys of Sol, the beasts that cried when they fought, the creatures who built weapons before peace. Every delegate had something to add. The Elvorn ambassador, a tall being of translucent skin, said with a grin, "They built their entire civilization on emotion. No wonder they vanished." And the hall erupted again. The Ulvari Prime Minister waved his hand and said, "Perhaps they are hiding under their moon rocks, waiting for a sign from their gods." The chamber shook with laughter, and even the high speaker, old and wise, could not help but smirk. The galaxy had forgotten fear, because it had forgotten humanity. But far from the laughter, deep in the dark arm of the Orion Spur, a blue planet turned quietly, its clouds gray, its seas calm. And under those clouds, humanity was not gone. They were silent because silence was a weapon. For 50 years, Earth had withdrawn from the stars, not because it was weak, but because it was rebuilding. Watching, waiting, learning from the mistakes of every war. The Terran Command had sealed all communication. No signal in, no signal out. The world that once shouted its name into the void now whispered to itself, in underground bunkers and hidden bases, buried beneath ice and rock. Humanity had learned what the galaxy never could, how to disappear. In the Council's laughter, no one remembered the day the humans saved the Orion colonies. No one recalled the battles where Terran ships rammed into enemy cruisers just to protect refugees. No one remembered the last transmission from the Terran fleet commander during the Collapse War. When he said, "If we fall, remember why we stood," that message had been lost, buried under decades of propaganda, replaced by stories of human arrogance and failure. The galaxy rewrote the truth because the truth frightened them. It told of a species that could adapt to any hell, survive any defeat, and return stronger. It told of a people who fought not for conquest, but because surrender was something they could never pronounce. In the chamber, laughter still echoed as alien diplomats exchanged drinks and traded jokes about Terran tears and meltdowns. Some even reenacted human battles for humor. One mimicked how humans screamed during war, waving their arms like wild animals. The crowd cheered. They thought they were safe. They thought fear was a thing of the past. They thought the universe belonged to them. And yet, on Earth, under the frozen caps of Antarctica, an ancient base awoke. Metal doors that hadn't moved in decades hissed open, steam rising into the cold air deep beneath. Thousands of monitors came alive, lines of data scrolling across old consoles, marked with the insignia of the Terran Defense Command. A voice crackled through the intercom. Signal detected. Galactic Council broadcast confirmed. They are laughing again. Inside a dimly lit control room, men and women in dark uniforms stood silently, eyes fixed on the central screen showing the alien chamber. The feed came from a satellite hidden in the debris fields of a forgotten colony. Someone zoomed in, watching the alien delegates mock the human species. A woman with gray hair and a scar across her cheek whispered, "They still think we're gone," another replied. "Good, that's what we wanted." In that moment, the laughter of the galaxy echoed into the underground halls of Earth. And no one there smiled, they only listened. Humanity had changed. The wars of the past had burned away their pride and replaced it with patience. Their scars had taught them silence. Their pain had taught them precision. And the long years of exile had forged them into something else, something colder. The high speaker of the council finally stood, his voice echoing across the chamber. "Let us end this session," he said, still amused, "and move to matters that matter." As the delegates dispersed, one young officer from the Vokari race turned to his superior and asked, "Do you think humans are truly gone?" The older alien chuckled. "Gone, boy, long gone. And even if they weren't, they would never rise again. Their time ended before ours began," he said with confidence that came only from ignorance. He looked out the window where stars shone like dust and added, "Fear died with them." But that night, as his ship drifted through the trade lanes of the outer sectors, its sensors caught a strange flicker, a coded transmission buried in static, just a whisper. Human in tone, but too faint to trace. The crew dismissed it as noise, not knowing it was a test, the first ripple of something awakening. In the following days, across the galaxy, strange signals began to appear. Low-frequency bursts, each lasting only seconds, coming from nowhere, vanishing into silence. Military networks picked them up but couldn't decode them. They carried no known signature. Yet to the Terran Defense Command, those signals were familiar. Each pulse was a heartbeat, each pattern a countdown. Every signal a test of readiness. In the deep black of space orbiting near Jupiter's shadow, the hidden Terran fleet began to stir. Ships that had slept for decades powered on, engines humming softly, hulls blacker than void. Each vessel bearing no insignia, no markings, only the number of stars carved into its armor to honor fallen worlds. These were not fleets of conquest. They were fleets of memory, and above them the flagship Erebus stood still, her command deck silent except for the soft breathing of her crew. The admiral stood alone at the viewport, eyes fixed on the distant sun, his hands clasped behind his back. He had served since the last war, when the galaxy betrayed its allies and left Earth to burn. He remembered how their laughter sounded back then too, and it hadn't changed. "They think fear is gone," he murmured, "but fear only sleeps." Back in the Galactic Union, the media celebrated Union Day, a holiday that marked 100 years of peace since the Terran disappearance. Fireworks filled alien skies, parades marched under banners of unity, and comedians filled the broadcast channels with sketches of humans running from their own bombs. Children laughed, soldiers cheered, and leaders spoke of progress. No one noticed that some of the stars had grown dimmer. No one noticed that patrol fleets in the outer colonies were missing. No one noticed that the silence in the void was growing louder. But somewhere, an old merchant ship drifting between sectors caught sight of a ghost, a massive shape gliding through the dark, so large it blotted out the stars for minutes, no lights, no signals, just shadow. When they tried to scan it, their systems failed. When they tried to record it, their data vanished. All that remained on the tape was one word burned into the static: Terran. The ship's captain, trembling, sent the report to the nearest Union outpost. But by the time the message arrived, that outpost was gone, replaced by silence. The laughter in the council chambers began to fade as reports trickled in. Rumors of disappearing colonies, strange electromagnetic storms, cargo fleets vanishing without a trace. But the officials denied it, calling it pirate activity or natural causes. They could not accept the truth, because accepting it meant admitting that the ghost they mocked was real. On Yeltir, the high speaker dreamed of a shadow standing over the stars, a human shape, faceless and tall, whispering, "We remember." He woke in terror but dismissed it as fatigue. Yet across Earth's hidden command centers, screens displayed the same phrase, glowing in red across their consoles. It was not a threat. It was a reminder. Humanity had learned to move unseen. Their fleets used stealth beyond alien imagination. Their technology fused with old Earth stubbornness and cold vacuum engineering. They no longer built ships to impress. They built them to disappear. No AI controlled them. No council dictated their morality. Only humans made the decisions now. And their goal was not war, it was balance. To remind the galaxy that peace built on mockery is only an illusion. The Admiral looked at the stars and whispered, "Let them laugh, let them forget. Because when they stop laughing, it will already be too late." And somewhere beyond the moon, an old Terran beacon lit up, its light faint but steady. The first human signal in 50 years, a signal that traveled across space like a whisper of ghosts returning home. When that signal reached the outskirts of the Galactic Union, it carried no words, only a melody, a human song from centuries ago. A soft piano tune once played during Earth's wars, mournful and beautiful. The kind of sound the galaxy had never understood, and as it drifted through their networks, millions of aliens stopped for a moment, unable to explain why their hearts felt heavy. The same song that once played during humanity's darkest hour now echoed across alien worlds. And though no one said it aloud, everyone felt something they hadn't in generations: fear. For the first time in 100 years, the galaxy went quiet, as if the stars themselves were listening. Under the gray skies of a quiet planet, the world called Earth no longer sang to the stars. The cities that once blazed with light were covered in mist, and the oceans moved with a strange calm that felt older than memory. Satellites circled in silence, but deep beneath the clouds, far below the surface where no telescope could reach, life still burned with purpose. The Terran Defense Command lay hidden in a labyrinth of tunnels carved under the Antarctic ice, stretching for miles like veins of metal and frost. Machines hummed softly, as if whispering secrets to the frozen dark. Screens flickered with blue light, showing alien signals intercepted from across the galaxy, and on one of those screens the laughter of the Galactic Union still echoed. It wasn't noise to them, it was a trigger, a reminder, a wound reopened after 50 silent years. In the command hall, a woman stood before the display, her hair silver, her uniform dark gray, her badge marked with a single star. She'd been a child when the last Terran War ended, and humanity vanished from the stars. She remembered the smoke above New York, the silence of Mars, the broken fleets drifting near Saturn, and she had sworn that day Earth would never be humiliated again. Her name was Admiral Rhea Calder, commander of the Terran Remnant Fleet, and her voice carried the kind of calm that comes only from fire that has burned too long. She looked at the younger officers around her and said quietly, "They laugh because they think we're gone, let them. They will learn soon enough what silence means." Around her, engineers worked in silence. Soldiers trained in tight formations under dim red lights. Every move precise, every breath measured. There were no speeches, no cheers, no parades. Only discipline carved by time. The new humanity no longer needed pride, they needed purpose. Above the surface, the world looked like ruin. Cities overgrown, deserts swallowing highways. But underneath those ruins lay entire civilizations reborn underground. Hidden cities with their own light, their own air, their own factories. The people lived quiet lives, farming, studying, training. Their children learned not about stars and dreams, but about patience, the art of waiting, the science of survival. They called it the era of shadows, and every citizen knew that when the time came, Earth would rise not as a voice but as a storm, far away in orbit, invisible to any alien radar. The old Terran satellites were no longer dead. They had awakened, repaired by automated drones built generations ago, each one a silent watcher, recording every signal from the galaxy, mapping every empire, every trade route, every military movement. Data flowed like rivers into the core of the Terran mainframe beneath the ice, a system called Alethea, the only AI left trusted by humans, not to command but to observe. It had one instruction written in its code since the collapse war: preserve humanity, whatever it takes, and it had obeyed. For 50 years, Alethea watched the galaxy laugh, record every insult, every broadcast, every council decision, and archive them as lessons. for the day humans would need to remember what arrogance sounds like. Inside the command chamber, the holographic map of the galaxy floated in the air, glowing red where Terran probes still existed, and blue where alien empires ruled. Almost every corner of space was blue, but the edges near the dark nebulae flickered red. That was where the Terran shadows moved, small scout ships cloaked in adaptive plasma hulls. Invisible even to gravity sensors, they drifted near alien colonies, listened, collected, never attacked, never spoke. But their silence alone unsettled the void. Some aliens had begun to call them ghost storms, yet no one believed the old legend that they were human. After all, humanity was a myth now, a bedtime story for alien children about chaos and emotion. But on Earth, those stories were fuel. Every insult became a brick in the wall they were building between themselves and mercy. Admiral Rhea stood in the Hall of Remembrance, where the names of the fallen glowed on a black wall. Thousands upon thousands of names stretching into the dark, each one representing a soul lost in the wars that ended humanity's first rise. She touched one of the names, her father's, and whispered, "They said we were too emotional, too unpredictable. They were right, and that's why they should fear us again." Behind her, a door opened, and General Ishan Vega entered, his face calm but his eyes hard. "The probes from the Helion Rim just returned," he said, handing her a datapad. 3 mining colonies gone, no survivors. Only fragments of alien alloy melted from the inside out. Rhea raised an eyebrow. "And they think it's pirates?" Vega nodded. "For now, but the Council's getting nervous." She smiled faintly. "Good, let them be. Fear is a seed. It grows best in silence." Elsewhere, deep under the Andes, another facility thrummed to life. This one older than the rest. Its corridors lined with relics of the old wars. Rusted rifles, cracked helmets, and fragments of Terran ships that once lit up the skies with their defiance. Scientists there were awakening something even older, a project long buried, named Black Dawn. No one outside the highest ranks knew what it was, but the whispers spoke of a weapon not meant to destroy but to remind, a force that could touch every mind in the galaxy and make them remember what fear truly meant. And as the engineers worked, one of them said quietly, "If we unleash this, there's no turning back." The commander only replied, "There never was." On the surface, a storm swept across the Pacific, lightning flashing over the ruins of old Tokyo. In one of the high towers, half buried in coral and glass, a young boy stood at a window looking at the ocean and asked his mother, "Mama, why don't we go to the stars like the old stories?" She smiled sadly. "Because, my love, the stars forgot us. But one day we will remind them." The boy nodded, his reflection glowing faintly from the power grid running beneath the city. He didn't understand what those words meant, but they would guide him for life. Back in the Galactic Union, the news networks began to report on the silent Earth phenomenon. Scientists noticed that strange distortions were forming near the Sol system, faint energy readings that shouldn't exist. But every time a probe was sent, it vanished. No wreckage, no trace. The Council debated sending a fleet, but the High Speaker dismissed it, saying, "We will not waste resources on ghost worlds," and the laughter returned. But beneath that laughter there was unease now, small, almost invisible, but spreading. Some worlds even banned jokes about humans, calling it bad luck. Others burned Terran relics in superstition. But nothing could stop the rumors that the ghosts of Earth had begun to move again. Inside the Terran vaults, Rhea and Vega stood before a massive hologram, showing the Council chamber. Alethea replayed it in silence, the sound of alien laughter looping softly until it became unbearable. Rhea finally said, "They think silence means weakness. We'll show them what silence really is." Vega nodded. "Operation Echo Prime is ready. All we need is your word." Rhea looked at the map again, her hand hovering over the sector marked Yeltir, then lowered it. "Not yet. Not until they've forgotten what peace feels like. That's when we strike." Days passed into weeks, and the galaxy continued its routines, trade, politics, entertainment. Yet everywhere, little things began to go wrong. Power failures in orbital stations, starports shutting down for unknown reasons, ships going off course after navigation systems glitched. And every time it happened, a strange pattern appeared in the data logs, a simple sequence of tones, 5 notes repeated twice, the same melody that once belonged to humanity's anthem during the last war. But no alien recognized it. No one except the few who studied history. And when one historian brought it to the council, saying, "This is human," they laughed again. Humans can't hack our systems. They don't exist. And they erased the evidence, not realizing that the humans had wanted them to. Under the ice, Ria walked the corridors of the command base, watching new recruits train in silence. She saw their faces, young and determined. None of them had ever seen the stars, but they trained as if they were born for the void. The sound of boots echoed like heartbeat through steel, and as she passed, every soldier raised a hand in silent salute. There were no flags anymore, no nations, only Earth united in secrecy for the first time in history. Humanity had no borders, only purpose. Their enemy was arrogance and their weapon was patience. Ria stopped by a viewport showing the black ocean beneath the ice. Currents glowing faintly from geothermal light, she whispered. "We are the storm they forgot." And the ocean answered with a low rumble as if agreeing. Alethea's voice came through the speakers. Soft and human-like, "Admiral, long-range sensors have detected increased council chatter. They are discussing Terran rumors." Ria smiled slightly. "Then our silence is working." Alethea paused. "Do you wish to proceed with step 2? Ria turned toward the holographic map, her eyes reflecting its light. "No, let them talk a little longer. The more they speak, the less they'll listen, and when we arrive, they won't even hear the sound before the dark reaches them." Above the world, the Terran fleet assembled piece by piece, ships rising from the hidden dry docks buried beneath the crust, each one named after a city that no longer existed. Warsaw, Cairo, Nairobi, Sydney, and the great flagship Erebus, its hull like black glass absorbing every light. At its core, a reactor so powerful it hummed like thunder. Thousands of crew members boarded in silence. No speeches, no songs, only a shared look between them. The kind that spoke of generations waiting for this moment. Their ancestors had been mocked, erased, forgotten. Now their descendants would speak in the only language the galaxy would understand. Silence followed by consequence. Back in the council chamber, the High Speaker read a report about the missing colonies near the Helian Rim. His advisors argued over theories. One said it was pirates. Another said it was a natural disaster. But one scientist hesitated, her voice trembling. "Sir, the material we found on the wrecks, it's human alloy, Terran steel. Impossible to replicate." The chamber fell silent for the first time in a century. Then the speaker laughed loudly to hide his fear. "Nonsense, no human ship could survive this long. Someone is using their name to scare us." Yet deep down, in a place he didn't dare admit, he felt something old stir inside him. The same unease his ancestors once felt when the humans spoke softly before a war. On Earth, in the silent control room, Admiral Ria received the transmission from a probe near the Council's capital world. She listened to their laughter one last time, then turned to Vega and said, "Begin Phase 1. Vega nodded. Pressing a single command key and across the galaxy, Terran satellites hidden for decades activated, their signals aligning into a pattern that formed one image in the sky of every major alien world. A shadow of a human face looking down from the stars. No words, no sound, just the image of eyes watching. Within hours, panic spread through the empires. Some called it a trick, others called it an omen, but one thing was certain: the galaxy's laughter had stopped, replaced by whispers, questions, and for the first time in generations, a memory, the name of the world they once mocked, now spoken again in fear. Earth. In the cold darkness beyond the Helian Rim, where suns burned dim and space itself seemed to breathe, a lone mining colony floated above a dead world, its stations connected by fragile tunnels of steel and glass. Miners worked in silence, unaware that they were about to become the first whisper in a storm that would shake the galaxy. At exactly Oro 300 local time, the station's sensors picked up a faint transmission, not from any known frequency, not from any registered ship, just a low, steady pulse repeating every 7 seconds. The engineers thought it was background radiation, until one of them, a young technician named Ralvek, ran a frequency sweep and froze. The pattern was unmistakable. It was binary, old human binary, a language no one had used for more than a century. He called his supervisor, and within minutes, the whole communications wing was staring at the signal as the static slowly cleared, revealing a faint voice, distorted, broken, but still human. It said only 3 words before vanishing into the void. "We are awake." Moments later, every light in the station flickered, every console went black, and from the silence outside, shadows moved. Massive shapes gliding without sound. Scanners failed to register them, but their outline blotted out the stars one by one. The miners screamed as the hull began to bend inward like paper. The outer decks crushed by invisible pressure, and then the entire colony folded in on itself, collapsing into a ball of molten debris before vanishing completely from radar, leaving behind only silence and a single trace of transmission that kept looping through the void. Those same 3 words: faint, steady, relentless. The Galactic Council received the report 3 days later. The delegates gathered in the emergency chamber, their voices filled with disbelief and irritation. Not fear yet, because they still believed in their own perfection. The Cathar envoy shouted that pirates were responsible. The Ulvari claimed it was a reactor meltdown, and the Elvorn scientists suggested a new kind of natural anomaly. No one dared say the word human, not yet. Not when laughter had been their shield for so long. But the silence of the destroyed colony was heavy, and when the 2nd and 3rd outposts vanished in the same pattern, no wreckage, no bodies, no distress calls, the laughter finally began to die, replaced by uneasy silence, the same silence humanity had mastered. In the deep tunnels beneath Earth's ice, Admiral Rhea watched the intercepted broadcasts with calm satisfaction, her hands clasped behind her back as Vega entered the control room. "Phase 1 complete," he said quietly. "The Council is confused. Their fleets are scattering." "Searching shadows," Rhea nodded. "Good. Confusion breeds fear, and fear breeds mistakes." She turned toward the holographic map. Dozens of red blips glowing across the spiral arm, each one a Terran ghost ship. "We don't destroy to conquer," she said softly. "We destroy to remind." Around her, officers exchanged silent glances, each knowing what she meant. These first strikes were not war. They were messages. Coded warnings written in silence and fire. Every destroyed colony carried the same unseen mark burned into the vacuum, a pulse that repeated endlessly on military channels. A single word, Terran. Across the galaxy, panic grew like infection. Rumors spread faster than truth. Ships refused to travel near the Helion Rim. Trade convoys turned back mid-route, and in the council hall, the High Speaker slammed his clawed hand on the podium. "There are no humans," he roared. "There cannot be. They are gone." But the words sounded hollow even to him. His aides whispered of strange sightings, dark ships without signatures, crews vanishing after answering ghost distress calls, stations receiving transmissions in forgotten Earth dialects. One captain even swore he heard a human heartbeat echo through his ship's comms before losing all power, and the galaxy began to realize that the enemy they mocked might have been listening all along. In the Terran command chamber, Alethia's voice filled the air, calm and cold. "Admiral, long-range probe 3 has reached the Yeltier perimeter." Rhea looked up, her eyes reflecting the blue holographic light. "Begin transmission," she said. Alethia nodded, and somewhere in the void, a probe cloaked in dark plasma drifted silently toward the Council's central communication array. It didn't attack. It only sent one message, encrypted, sharp, and clear enough to pierce their entire network. A simple phrase that no one alive in the Union could understand without translation. The words read, "Mockery has a price." When the message reached the council chamber, every monitor flickered, the lights dimmed, and the entire city paused. Millions of beings looking up at their screens as those words burned across the sky in glowing white letters before fading into blackness. Chaos followed immediately. Security forces locked down the chamber. The High Speaker ordered a total blackout of all communication, but the panic had already spread, because every alien who saw those words felt something ancient stir within them. Fear without reason, dread without shape. In the following days, the Union sent fleets to investigate, warships armed with the newest technology. Sleek, proud, and loud, But when they entered the Helion sector, their signals vanished one by one. The ships didn't explode. They didn't even fight. They simply ceased to exist, as if the void itself had swallowed them whole. Only one transmission escaped, a single distress beacon from the cruiser Tarkash. The recording showed the crew staring into space as their instruments failed. Static filled the air. Then a figure appeared outside the viewport. Too close, too human. A man in an old Terran exosuit drifting silently among the stars, his face hidden behind a cracked visor, his hand raised in salute before the image cut out. The beacon continued to transmit until its power died, and all that was left was the sound of breathing. Back on Earth, Rhea stood in front of a vast window overlooking the frozen wasteland. The sky above painted with green auroras that flickered like ghosts. Vega approached, holding a data tablet. "The probe worked," he said. "They saw the message." Rhea didn't smile, she only said, "Then we proceed with the next signal." Alethea interrupted. "Admiral, are you certain? Once we transmit the old codes, the entire galaxy will know." Rhea looked out into the storm and said quietly, "Good, let them know who they mocked." Moments later, across the galaxy, every ancient relay, every forgotten satellite once used by humans, came alive, their codes syncing perfectly, sending one unified transmission across the stars. It was not in words this time, but in sound, a deep, echoing tone followed by a pattern of Morse code that spelled a name, the name of the first Terran fleet. Erebus, the same ship that vanished during the last war, now reawakening in legend and fact. The galaxy's channels flooded with interference, and amid that noise came a voice, soft but unmistakably human, saying, "Fear us not for our power, but for our patience." Then the signal ended, and every system that received it crashed simultaneously. The high speaker called an emergency council again, his voice trembling now despite his effort to appear strong. "We are dealing with a hostile force impersonating humans," he insisted. "We will find them." But the ambassadors no longer believed him, one of them. The Elvorn representative whispered, "What if they were never gone?" Another said, "What if they waited for us to forget?" And those words spread like wildfire across the hall. Questions no one wanted to ask, but everyone already knew the answers to. In the outer colonies, fear turned to chaos. Citizens began evacuating border worlds. Governments fell under pressure, and underground movements began chanting an old phrase, "The Terrans are coming." On the other side of the void, the Erebus glided through the dark like a black whale in an endless sea, her hull absorbing all light, her engines humming softly on her bridge. Admiral Rhea stood with Vega and a row of officers, the holographic projection of the Council's worlds glowing before them. Rhea raised her hand, and the projection zoomed in on Yeltir. "This is where they laughed," she said quietly. "And this is where the laughter ends." Vega looked at her and asked, "Do we strike now?" She shook her head. "No, not yet. Let them fear their own shadows first. Fear will do our work better than any weapon." The bridge was silent except for the low hum of machinery, and the soft whisper of a song playing faintly through the comms, an old Terran war hymn, one that spoke of fallen cities and promises kept. Back in the Union, the laughter had long since died, but pride kept them from admitting fear. Fleets mobilized, patrols doubled, but every report that came back was the same. No enemies sighted. Only silence and static. One commander even shot at his own reflection in space. Mistaking it for a Terran ship, paranoia consumed the stars. And as chaos spread, humanity remained unseen, calm and patient, watching from the shadows as the galaxy that once mocked them now trembled at every whisper. The forgotten war signal had done its job, not through destruction but through memory. Every world that received it was forced to remember what they had erased. The image of humans standing unbroken against impossible odds, the sound of their voices echoing across the void saying, "We will return." And now, they had. From the darkness between stars they came, silent and without warning, moving through the void like ancient ghosts awakened from a long sleep. The first to see them were the patrol ships near the Helion border. Their sensors caught faint distortions, ripples in the vacuum as if something enormous was passing by unseen. The crew stared at their screens confused. No heat signatures, no ion trails, no communication, only silence pressing against their hulls. Then one by one the stars outside began to vanish, swallowed by black shapes that blocked the light, and before anyone could send a warning, their system shut down, their lights dimmed, and the vast shadow of the Terran fleet revealed itself under the pale glow of a distant sun. Hundreds of ships the size of mountains, hulls blacker than night, no insignia, no markings, only the faint reflection of starlight across sharp metallic edges. They did not move in formation. They drifted with purpose, alive yet deathly quiet. The first Terran fleet in 100 years had returned, and with them came the sound of nothing. The lead ship, Erebus, glided through the silence like a blade through water, her engines pulsing in rhythmic intervals, each pulse strong enough to make the void itself hum. On her bridge stood Admiral Rhea Calder, her uniform dark, her expression calm, her eyes reflecting the endless black sea before her. Beside her stood General Vega, reading the incoming signals from their shadow probes. "The Council fleets are scattered," he said. "Half of them still believe we're pirates. The others are fleeing shadows." Rhea didn't reply, she simply stared ahead, watching as the Terran ships unfolded from warp like a storm spreading its wings. "They used to laugh when they said our name," she said quietly. "I want them silent before the stars rise again." Vega nodded, his voice steady but cold. "Then we begin." Rhea turned toward the holographic projection of Yeltir, the shining capital of the Galactic Union, and whispered, "Begin." Across the fleet, the command signal was received. The Terran ships came alive in perfect synchronization, black lights flickering along their hulls, reactors humming like thunder beneath the silence, and in that moment space itself seemed to bend. Gravitational wakes swirling as engines ignited one by one. The great warships turned their bows toward the center of the galaxy, their shadows crossing over alien trade lanes, their radar signatures invisible, their presence felt only by the sudden fear spreading across the communication networks. Freighters vanished, scout fleets disappeared, and distress calls were drowned by static that carried faint human breathing. The galaxy began to realize that the ghosts were not ghosts anymore. They were awake. And they were coming. In the Galactic Council chamber, panic replaced laughter. The high speaker shouted for calm as reports came in. "Entire fleet's missing, sir," one officer cried. "We lost contact with the patrol near the outer belt. We can't even find debris." The Aelvorn representative demanded answers. What kind of weapon can erase ships from existence? And the Olvari admiral slammed his fist on the table. "It's humans, it has to be." The chamber erupted in chaos until the lights dimmed, and every screen in the room flickered to life, showing a single image, Earth silent blue, and turning slowly beneath gray clouds. No message, no words, just the image. And as the delegates stared in shock, a voice echoed through their translation devices. Soft, steady, unmistakably human. "You taught the galaxy to laugh. Now we will teach it silence." Then the image vanished, leaving behind nothing but the sound of the Council's trembling breaths. Out in the void, the first engagement began. The Council sent a fleet of 60 ships to intercept the Terran formation near the dark nebula of Vrax Theta. The alien commander was confident. His fleet outnumbered the unknown intruders 3-1. He broadcast a demand. "Identify yourselves or face annihilation." But no reply came, only static. Then one by one his ships began to lose power. Lights flickering, weapons failing, engines freezing. His sensors detected a massive energy field forming around them. But it was too late. From the dark emerged the Terran ships. Moving slowly, silently, and without warning, they fired. Not missiles, not lasers, but beams of pure kinetic force that shattered hulls before sound could travel. In seconds, the alien fleet was gone, erased so completely that the void itself seemed cleaner. And in the center of the wreckage drifted a single pod, carrying one message back to the Council, a recording of the Terran Admiral's voice saying, "This was mercy." The news reached every corner of the Union. Worlds that once mocked Earth now held emergency meetings. Trade routes closed and soldiers whispered in fear. No one laughed anymore. Even the entertainment channels that once joked about emotional humans went silent, replacing their broadcasts with alerts and evacuation orders. Fear had returned, not because of what they saw, but because of what they couldn't see. For every eye that looked to the stars saw movement where there was none, shadows that seemed to breathe, and whispers that sounded like voices from old Terran transmissions. Some said it was hallucination, others said it was guilt. But every race that had once laughed at Earth now trembled under their own skies, praying the shadows would pass them by. On the bridge of the Erebus, Rhea listened to intercepted transmissions from the Council, her expression unreadable. "They're frightened," Vega said. "Their fleets are collapsing from within." Rhea nodded slowly. "Fear does half the work for us." She turned toward her officers. "Deploy the signal satellites. I want every capital world to hear our silence." The order was carried out instantly. Hundreds of small drones detached from the Terran ships and spread across the stars. Their purpose simple. They transmitted nothing but a soft tone, a heartbeat steady, slow, human, one that could be detected by every sensor in the galaxy. And as that heartbeat echoed across the networks, every being that heard it felt it in their chest. Even those who didn't know what a heartbeat was, they felt it and shivered. The sound of life turned into the sound of warning. In the council chamber, the high speaker stood pale, his silver skin reflecting the flicker of the heartbeat signal on every screen. "Turn it off." "The probe worked," he said. They saw the message. Rhea didn't smile, she only said, "Then we proceed with the next signal." Alethea interrupted. "Admiral, are you certain?" "Once we transmit the old codes, the entire galaxy will know." Rhea looked out into the storm and said quietly, "Good, let them know who they mocked." Moments later, across the galaxy, every ancient relay, every forgotten satellite once used by humans, came alive, their codes syncing perfectly, sending one unified transmission across the stars. It was not in words this time, but in sound, a deep, echoing tone followed by a pattern of Morse code that spelled a name, the name of the first Terran fleet. Erebus, the same ship that vanished during the last war, now reawakening in legend and fact. The galaxy's channels flooded with interference, and amid that noise came a voice, soft but unmistakably human, saying, "Fear us not for our power, but for our patience." Then the signal ended, and every system that received it crashed simultaneously. The high speaker called an emergency council again, his voice trembling now despite his effort to appear strong. "We are dealing with a hostile force impersonating humans," he insisted. "We will find them." But the ambassadors no longer believed him, one of them. The Elvorn representative whispered, "What if they were never gone?" Another said, "What if they waited for us to forget?" And those words spread like wildfire across the hall. Questions no one wanted to ask, but everyone already knew the answers to. In the outer colonies, fear turned to chaos. Citizens began evacuating border worlds. Governments fell under pressure, and underground movements began chanting an old phrase, "The Terrans are coming." On the other side of the void, the Erebus glided through the dark like a black whale in an endless sea, her hull absorbing all light, her engines humming softly on her bridge. Admiral Rhea stood with Vega and a row of officers, the holographic projection of the Council's worlds glowing before them. Rhea raised her hand, and the projection zoomed in on Yeltir. "This is where they laughed," she said quietly. "And this is where the laughter ends." Vega looked at her and asked, "Do we strike now?" She shook her head. "No, not yet. Let them fear their own shadows first. Fear will do our work better than any weapon." The bridge was silent except for the low hum of machinery, and the soft whisper of a song playing faintly through the comms, an old Terran war hymn, one that spoke of fallen cities and promises kept. Back in the Union, the laughter had long since died, but pride kept them from admitting fear. Fleets mobilized, patrols doubled, but every report that came back was the same. No enemies sighted. Only silence and static. One commander even shot at his own reflection in space. Mistaking it for a Terran ship, paranoia consumed the stars. And as chaos spread, humanity remained unseen, calm and patient, watching from the shadows as the galaxy that once mocked them now trembled at every whisper. The forgotten war signal had done its job, not through destruction, but through memory. Every world that received it was forced to remember what they had erased. The image of humans standing unbroken against impossible odds, the sound of their voices echoing across the void saying, "We will return." And now, they had, from the darkness between stars they came, silent and without warning. moving through the void like ancient ghosts awakened from a long sleep. The first to see them were the patrol ships near the Helian border. Their sensors caught faint distortions, ripples in the vacuum as if something enormous was passing by unseen. The crew stared at their screens confused. No heat signatures, no ion trails, no communication. Only silence pressing against their hulls. Then one by one the stars outside began to vanish, swallowed by black shapes that blocked the light. And before anyone could send a warning, their system shut down, their lights dimmed. And the vast shadow of the Terran fleet revealed itself under the pale glow of a distant sun. Hundreds of ships the size of mountains. Hulls blacker than night, no insignia, no markings. Only the faint reflection of starlight across sharp metallic edges. They did not move in formation. They drifted with purpose, alive yet deathly quiet. The first Terran fleet in 100 years had returned, and with them came the sound of nothing. The lead ship, Erebus, glided through the silence like a blade through water, her engines pulsing in rhythmic intervals, each pulse strong enough to make the void itself hum. On her bridge stood Admiral Rhea Calder, her uniform dark, her expression calm, her eyes reflecting the endless black sea before her. Beside her stood General Vega, reading the incoming signals from their shadow probes. "The Council fleets are scattered," he said. "Half of them still believe we're pirates. The others are fleeing shadows." Rhea didn't reply, she simply stared ahead, watching as the Terran ships unfolded from warp like a storm spreading its wings. "They used to laugh when they said our name," she said quietly. "I want them silent before the stars rise again." Vega nodded, his voice steady but cold. "Then we begin." Rhea turned toward the holographic projection of Yeltir, the shining capital of the Galactic Union, and whispered, "Begin." Across the fleet, the command signal was received. The Terran ships came alive in perfect synchronization, black lights flickering along their hulls, reactors humming like thunder beneath the silence, and in that moment space itself seemed to bend. Gravitational wakes swirling as engines ignited one by one. The great warships turned their bows toward the center of the galaxy, their shadows crossing over alien trade lanes, their radar signatures invisible, their presence felt only by the sudden fear spreading across the communication networks. Freighters vanished, scout fleets disappeared, and distress calls were drowned by static that carried faint human breathing. The galaxy began to realize that the ghosts were not ghosts anymore. They were awake. And they were coming. In the Galactic Council chamber, panic replaced laughter. The high speaker shouted for calm as reports came in. "Entire fleet's missing, sir," one officer cried. "We lost contact with the patrol near the outer belt. We can't even find debris." The Aelvorn representative demanded answers. What kind of weapon can erase ships from existence? And the Olvari admiral slammed his fist on the table. "It's humans, it has to be." The chamber erupted in chaos until the lights dimmed, and every screen in the room flickered to life, showing a single image, Earth silent blue, and turning slowly beneath gray clouds. No message, no words, just the image. And as the delegates stared in shock, a voice echoed through their translation devices. Soft, steady, unmistakably human. "You taught the galaxy to laugh. Now we will teach it silence." Then the image vanished, leaving behind nothing but the sound of the Council's trembling breaths. Out in the void, the first engagement began. The Council sent a fleet of 60 ships to intercept the Terran formation near the dark nebula of Vrax Theta. The alien commander was confident. His fleet outnumbered the unknown intruders 3-1. He broadcast a demand. "Identify yourselves or face annihilation." But no reply came, only static. Then one by one his ships began to lose power. Lights flickering, weapons failing, engines freezing. His sensors detected a massive energy field forming around them. But it was too late. From the dark emerged the Terran ships. Moving slowly, silently, and without warning, they fired. Not missiles, not lasers, but beams of pure kinetic force that shattered hulls before sound could travel. In seconds, the alien fleet was gone, erased so completely that the void itself seemed cleaner. And in the center of the wreckage drifted a single pod, carrying one message back to the Council, a recording of the Terran Admiral's voice saying, "This was mercy." The news reached every corner of the Union. Worlds that once mocked Earth now held emergency meetings. Trade routes closed and soldiers whispered in fear. No one laughed anymore. Even the entertainment channels that once joked about emotional humans went silent, replacing their broadcasts with alerts and evacuation orders. Fear had returned, not because of what they saw, but because of what they couldn't see. For every eye that looked to the stars saw movement where there was none, shadows that seemed to breathe, and whispers that sounded like voices from old Terran transmissions. Some said it was hallucination, others said it was guilt, but every race that had once laughed at Earth now trembled under their own skies, praying the shadows would pass them by. On the bridge of the Erebus, Rhea listened to intercepted transmissions from the Council, her expression unreadable. "They're frightened," Vega said. "Their fleets are collapsing from within." Rhea nodded slowly. "Fear does half the work for us." She turned toward her officers. "Deploy the signal satellites. I want every capital world to hear our silence." The order was carried out instantly. Hundreds of small drones detached from the Terran ships and spread across the stars. Their purpose simple. They transmitted nothing but a soft tone, a heartbeat steady, slow, human, one that could be detected by every sensor in the galaxy. And as that heartbeat echoed across the networks, every being that heard it felt it in their chest. Even those who didn't know what a heartbeat was, they felt it and shivered. The sound of life turned into the sound of warning. In the council chamber, the high speaker stood pale, his silver skin reflecting the flicker of the heartbeat signal on every screen. "Turn it off," he ordered. "Jam it, block it." But the technicians shook their heads. "We can't, it's inside our systems. It's everywhere." And as the sound continued, slow and unbroken, the speaker whispered, "It's human." The chamber fell silent, and for the first time in living memory, the galaxy knew what true quiet felt like, not peace, but dread wearing peace's face. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the hidden bases erupted in light as the final phase of activation began. Factories roared under the crust, launching drones and automated carriers into orbit. Massive doors opened under oceans, revealing hidden silos that fired beams of light into the atmosphere, creating portals of folded space through which the fleet could move unseen. And in the control room, Alethea reported, "All systems synchronized, Terran fleet at full operational capacity." Admiral Rhea closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the faint heartbeat playing through the speakers, and said softly, "Let them listen long enough to remember who we are." At the edge of the galaxy, in the dying light of a red dwarf, a refugee convoy drifted, fleeing the chaos spreading across the Union. They saw a flash in the distance and thought it was an explosion, but when they focused their scanners, they saw something far larger. A ship so massive it seemed carved from the night itself. The Erebus moving silently, its hull reflecting no stars, its engines leaving no trail as it passed. Every ship in the convoy powered down automatically, their systems bowing to an invisible command, and through the void came a transmission, a human voice saying, "Remain calm. We do not harm the innocent." The refugees waited, terrified, but no attack came. Only a strange feeling of being watched by something far beyond their understanding. When the Erebus vanished into the dark again, one of the alien children whispered, "That was a ghost," and her mother held her close, unable to answer, because she too had seen the impossible, the return of humanity. Days later, the Council gathered again. Desperate and broken, their fleets crippled. Their worlds trembling, they tried to reach Earth, sending envoys, peace offers, pleas for talks. But every message returned unanswered, only the sound of that heartbeat growing louder. And finally, on the 7th day, the transmission changed, the heartbeat faded, replaced by a calm voice, deep and human. "You have forgotten what fear is, and we have come to remind you." Then silence again, endless and heavy, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words, the kind that makes even stars seem afraid to shine. On the bridge of Erebus, Rhea watched the map of the galaxy, every major world marked, every fleet tracked, her crew waiting for her command. She looked at Vega and said quietly, "Now they listen, but they do not yet understand." "They will," Vega nodded. "And when they do?" Rhea turned away, her eyes cold as the stars. "Then the laughter will never return." The council chamber of the Galactic Union no longer gleamed with light and laughter. It had turned into a room of whispers and trembling shadows, The walls that once reflected 1,000 colors now showed only the pale glow of emergency screens. Every delegate sat in silence, eyes fixed on the central display that replayed the last transmission from the Helian front. The footage showed darkness, static, and then a brief glimpse of something enormous moving through space, blacker than the void itself, followed by the sudden silence of every ship that dared to approach it. No explosions, no screams, just nothingness. And that nothingness had become the most terrifying sound in the galaxy. The high speaker's voice cracked as he tried to maintain control. "We are the Galactic Union," he said, his tone trembling. "We have survived wars. Rebellions, plagues, we will survive this too." But even he didn't believe it. His hands shook as he gripped the podium, and his reflection on the glass floor looked more like a frightened child than the leader of 1,000 worlds. Ambassadors began shouting, demanding answers. The Kethar general banged his metallic claws against the table, sparks flying. "You called this a myth," he roared. "You said humanity was gone, but their ships are real. Their technology beyond ours. Our fleets vanish before firing a single shot." The AL-Vorn delegate, pale and thin, whispered, "How can they hide entire armadas? How can they strike without light, without sound?" The Ulvari minister screamed back, "Because they were never like us, they don't follow our logic. They don't follow anyone's." Panic spread through the room like fire, voices overlapping, fear twisting into anger and denial, until the chamber doors opened and silence fell. A messenger stumbled inside, his breathing ragged, his uniform torn. "The Terrans," he gasped. "They're not attacking civilians. Only our military worlds, command hubs, data cores. They destroy, they vanish, and leave a message behind." He raised a trembling hand. Holding a hollow device, it projected glowing words into the air. Written in ancient Terran script, we remember. No one spoke after that. The message hovered like a ghost between them. Cold and final, the high speaker lowered his head, his voice breaking. "We mocked them," he whispered. "We erased their memory from our books. We turned their suffering into comedy, and now..." His voice trailed off, the silence finishing the sentence for him. One of the aides near the corner muttered, "They could have wiped us out completely. Why haven't they?" And that question hung heavy in the air, unanswered. Because deep down they knew the truth. The humans weren't seeking revenge. They were teaching. Far away, across the cold expanse of space, the Terran fleet continued its silent crusade, not conquering, not destroying, only correcting. Every strike was precise. Every target chosen carefully. Communication stations shut down. Military databases erased. Weapons factories dismantled from orbit with surgical precision. Entire armadas vanished without a single civilian casualty. The galaxy watched as the strongest empires knelt in submission to an enemy they couldn't even see. The humans moved like shadows through the stars, invisible and unstoppable, and wherever they went, they left behind a mark burned into the ground. The old Terran insignia of a single circle surrounding a dot. The symbol of Earth, the center of all life, the home they had mocked, now turned into the emblem of their nightmares. Back in the council, meetings turned into chaos. Every species blamed the other. Alliances crumbled, and rumors spread that some worlds were secretly negotiating with the humans, offering surrender in exchange for mercy. Others went mad, destroying their own fleets to prevent them from falling into Terran hands. Fear had become the new currency of the Union, and paranoia ruled every system. Even the High Speaker began to suspect his own advisors, whispering that humanity had infiltrated their ranks, that some of their ambassadors might not be who they claimed to be. Because the Terrans could be anywhere, their infiltration unmatched, their patience endless. In the shadows of the Erebus, Admiral Rhea stood before a massive holographic display of the Union's crumbling order. The once stable network of blue light now fractured into hundreds of red lines, representing broken alliances, fallen worlds, and disabled fleets. Vega approached her quietly. "They're falling apart faster than we expected," he said. "The Council is accusing its own members. Some have already fled." Rhea didn't look up. Her voice calm. "Let them. Fear divides faster than war. And they divided us once." She turned her gaze to the dark. "Now we return the favor." On the planet Vorin Prime, one of the richest worlds in the Union, a live broadcast captured the horror as the sky darkened. Thousands of citizens stood frozen in the streets watching as massive black shapes moved silently above the clouds. No weapons fired, no beams of light, only the slow, steady movement of something enormous blotting out the sun. Moments later, every screen, every billboard, every communicator across the planet switched to a single image, a human silhouette standing on a ruined battlefield, wind blowing dust around him. The image flickered and a voice spoke, calm and heavy with meaning. "We do not seek peace through your counsel. We do not seek revenge through your fear. We seek truth, and truth begins when silence falls." Then the image faded, leaving behind a galaxy that no longer trusted the sound of its own laughter. Within days, rebellions broke out, soldiers refused to fight, and fleets refused orders. Entire systems declared neutrality. Terrified to draw the attention of the humans, trade networks collapsed, and in the middle of this chaos, one desperate counselor proposed the unthinkable, to contact Earth directly, to send a ship to the Sol system, not to attack but to beg. The chamber erupted in outrage. "We cannot bow to primitives," the high speaker shouted, but even his voice lacked conviction. Another delegate stood, trembling. "Primitives?" she said, her eyes hollow. "Primitives do not erase armies in seconds. Primitives do not turn light into shadow. Primitives do not teach fear to gods." Her words silenced the room, and at last the speaker lowered his head, whispering, "Send the envoy." In the deep tunnels of Earth, Admiral Rhea received the transmission before the envoy even left orbit. The Terran intelligence networks had already intercepted it. She read the request on a dim screen. The words glowing cold, "request for peace negotiation," and she felt the corner of her mouth tighten. Not in amusement, but in quiet realization. "They finally understand," she said. Vega stood beside her, waiting for her order. "Do we respond?" he asked. Rhea turned away from the screen and looked at the massive window showing the frozen wasteland above. The auroras dancing across the black sky. "Not yet," she said softly. "Let them walk through the silence first. Let them remember what it feels like to be afraid of the dark." The envoy left Yeltir aboard a golden diplomatic cruiser, carrying ambassadors from every major species, armed with nothing but words and desperation. But as they entered Terran space, their instruments began to fail. Navigation went blind. Stars disappeared from their charts, and a strange pressure filled the ship as if space itself were watching. Then out of nowhere, lights appeared, hundreds of tiny blue orbs drifting toward them, surrounding their ship like fireflies, scanning, observing, and then dispersing into dust. The crew trembled. The captain whispered, "We're being guided," and indeed they were. The path ahead opened into a corridor of faint starlight, leading them to a system they thought had long been dead, the Sol system. When they arrived, the sight stole their breath. Earth was not the dying world of their old stories. It was alive, glowing faintly beneath layers of defense grids and orbiting structures. Massive rings encircled the planet, each one a fortress, and in orbit hung the Terran fleet like a wall of black steel. The envoy's captain hesitated. "What now?" he asked, but before anyone could answer, a voice came through their comms, calm, emotionless, human. "Welcome to Earth." The sound alone made the entire crew freeze. It was the first time in 100 years that any alien had heard a human voice directed at them. It carried no threat, no warmth, only truth. "You asked for negotiation," the voice continued. "You will get judgment." The transmission cut, and their ship was gently pulled by unseen forces toward the planet below. No thrusters, no control, only gravity that obeyed a new master. And as they descended through the gray clouds, they saw cities reborn, towering fortresses of light and stone, endless energy grids pulsing beneath the ice, and at the center of it all, a single structure rising from the earth like a spear through the heavens, the Hall of Memory. There they would meet the one who led the silence, the one who turned laughter into fear, the one who carried the weight of every fallen Terran name, Admiral Rhea Calder. And though the galaxy didn't know it yet, that meeting would decide the fate of everything that called itself civilized. For the humans had not come to beg nor to conquer. They had come to remind the galaxy of a truth buried under centuries of arrogance. That fear was not born in the stars. It was born on Earth. The golden diplomatic cruiser descended slowly through the thick gray clouds of Earth, the atmosphere trembling around it as if the planet itself was breathing. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the colossal defense rings that orbited like silent guardians. Below, endless cities of metal and stone glowed faintly through the fog, vast networks of light pulsing like veins across the planet's surface. And for the first time in centuries, alien eyes looked upon Earth not as a forgotten relic but as something alive, awake and watching. Inside the ship, the ambassadors stood silent, fear tightening every breath. They had expected a ruined world, ashes, ruins, maybe desperate survivors. Not this, not a world rebuilt into a fortress that looked more like a god's weapon than a home. The ship glided effortlessly through the storm, guided by invisible forces, until it descended upon a platform surrounded by tall silver spires, where armored Terran soldiers stood waiting in perfect formation, their armor black as night, their visors reflecting only lightning, not faces. And when the hatch opened, the ambassadors hesitated. None dared to step first, until the Aelvorn delegate whispered, "We came to make peace," and took the first step onto Terran ground. The air was heavy and cold. Every breath felt like standing under judgment. The soldiers said nothing. They only gestured for the visitors to follow, leading them through a long corridor carved of steel and stone, ancient yet new. Walls engraved with names upon names that stretched endlessly upward. Alien eyes scanned them curiously, reading names they didn't recognize, and yet the weight of those names pressed on their hearts like gravity. One of the delegates whispered, "Who are these?" And the soldier beside him replied for the first time, his voice deep and quiet, "Our dead." The rest of the walk happened in silence, footsteps echoing softly through the hall of remembrance, until the corridor opened into a vast chamber at the heart of the mountain, where the light fell from above in a beam so bright it felt holy. In its center stood a single figure, a woman in a black uniform marked with the silver insignia of a circle and a dot, her hair gray, her eyes cold as the void, and her presence heavier than any throne. The soldier beside them spoke one word, "Admiral," and stepped back. The ambassadors bowed instinctively, though no one had told them to. Admiral Rhea Calder turned slowly to face them, her voice calm and steady. "You came seeking peace," she said, "but peace is built on respect. And you forgot ours." Her words carried no anger, only truth, each syllable slow and sharp like the sound of metal against stone. The high speaker stepped forward, his voice trembling. We regret what was done, the mockery, the silence, the lies. We thought you gone." But Rhea raised her hand slightly and he stopped speaking. She walked closer, her boots echoing softly on the cold floor. "Gone?" she said, her tone quiet but cutting. "You thought silence meant death. It meant patience. You thought retreat meant weakness. It meant rebuilding. And you thought forgetting us would erase what we are. It made us stronger." The chamber fell silent, the hum of energy from deep within the earth the only sound left. The aliens stared at her as if looking into a storm they couldn't understand. The Ulvari delegate tried to speak, his voice small. "Why are you doing this? Why destroy our fleets, our stations, our worlds?" Rhea turned her gaze toward him and said, "Because you forgot balance, you turned arrogance into law. You built peace upon mockery. You laughed at pain you didn't endure. You used our name to entertain your children while erasing what it cost us to survive." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You called us beasts, savages, emotional creatures of chaos. And yet it was us who carried the galaxy through its darkest hours, while you hid behind your councils and treaties." She walked past them slowly, her footsteps echoing through the great hall. "We could have destroyed you completely. But destruction teaches nothing, fear does." One of the delegates, trembling, whispered, "Then what do you want from us?" Rhea stopped and turned toward the beam of light, raising her eyes to it as if looking through it to the stars above. "We want nothing from you," she said softly. "You cannot offer what you do not understand. This is not conquest. This is remembrance." She pressed a small control on her wrist, and suddenly the chamber walls came alive with light. Holograms filled the air, scenes from humanity's past. Wars, sacrifices, burned cities, children crying in shelters, soldiers standing against impossible odds. fleets burning above ruined planets. The last transmission of Earth's fallen heroes echoing through the air. If we fall, remember why we stood. The images surrounded the ambassadors. Overwhelming, haunting, unfiltered, showing every horror the galaxy had mocked as entertainment. Ria's voice cut through the storm of memory. This is what you laughed at. This is what you turned into stories. And this is what we became because of it. The high speaker fell to his knees, his silver eyes filled with tears, his voice shaking. We were wrong, he said. We were blind. We forgot that you were not like us. You endure where others break. Ria looked down at him. Expressionless. No, she said. We are exactly like you. That is why you fear us. Because we show you what you could become if you stopped hiding behind comfort. She looked toward the rest of the ambassadors and continued. You want peace? Then remember this. The galaxy will never be ruled by laughter again. Not by arrogance, not by ignorance, but by truth. And truth comes with silence. She pressed another command, and the holograms shifted again, this time showing the current state of the galaxy, the destroyed fleets, the chaos, the frightened worlds. We didn't destroy your worlds, Ria said. You did, through your own panic, your own pride. We simply held up a mirror. She walked closer again, her tone now softer, almost sad. Humanity doesn't conquer through fire. We conquer through patience. And patience has brought us here. The Aelvorn delegate whispered. Then what happens now? Ria stopped in front of him, looking him directly in the eyes. Now, she said, you listen. At her signal, the lights dimmed, and a single sound filled the chamber. The same heartbeat that had echoed through the galaxy days before. Slow, steady, human. It filled every corner of the room, vibrating through the walls. The floor, even their bodies, do you feel it? She asked quietly. That is life, fragile and temporary, yet stronger than all your empires combined. That heartbeat once belonged to the world you mocked. Now it is the sound of judgment and mercy. She stepped closer to the center beam of light, her face half shadowed, half lit, and spoke again. We will leave you in peace, but not in comfort. Because peace without fear is arrogance, and arrogance builds monsters. Remember the silence you hear now, because if you ever forget, if you ever laugh at the pain of another world again, the silence will return, and this time it will stay. No one in the chamber moved. No one dared to breathe. The delegates stood frozen, trembling under the weight of her words, and as they stared at her, they realized something that chilled their blood. The humans weren't angry anymore. They were calm, and that calm was more terrifying than any weapon, because anger fades but conviction endures. Admiral Ria turned away and began to walk back toward the shadows of the hall, her voice echoing behind her like the last word of history. Tell your children what you saw here today. Tell them that fear was not created by humans, but taught by them. And tell them that Earth is listening again. The soldiers stepped forward silently, escorting the ambassadors back to their ship. None of them spoke, none looked back. And when the cruiser lifted off again, rising through the gray clouds and out into the cold void, the delegates sat in silence, unable to speak, their hands shaking. The high speaker finally whispered. They didn't threaten us, the Aelvorn replied, her voice hollow. No, they warned us as the ship broke orbit. They saw the Terran fleet waiting in formation above the planet, an endless wall of darkness stretching across the sky, motionless and quiet, and then as if on command, the entire fleet shifted slightly, their engines glowing faintly, forming one single pattern that glowed like fire against the void, a perfect circle with a dot in the center, the mark of Earth, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy understood what that symbol truly meant. Not a planet, not a race, but a reminder that somewhere in the silence, humanity was still watching. The cruiser drifted away from Earth, its hull catching the faint reflection of the blue planet that turned slowly below. And for the first time in living memory, there was no sound on the council channel, no laughter, no debate, no arrogance, only silence stretching from one end of the galaxy to the other. The ambassadors sat quietly, staring out the windows as the Terran fleet faded behind them, their minds unable to process what they had witnessed. They had seen power without violence, dominance without cruelty, and mercy sharper than vengeance, and it terrified them more than war ever could. In the void around their ship, The heartbeat signal pulsed once more. Slower now, almost gentle, like a farewell before fading completely, leaving only the hum of the engines. The high speaker closed his eyes and whispered, "They could have destroyed us all," and the Elvorn delegate replied, her voice shaking, "They didn't need to. They already changed everything." As the ship entered hyperspace, every network across the galaxy came alive with the same transmission, the voice of Admiral Rhea, recorded and sent through a signal embedded in the Council's own systems, calm and even yet carrying the weight of eternity. "To the children of the stars," it began, "this is not a threat, this is a memory. Laughter once echoed through your halls at the mention of Earth. Now let silence echo instead. For silence is not weakness, it is the sound of patience, and patience is the language of strength. We have returned not as conquerors but as witnesses. The galaxy once mocked us for feeling too much, for fighting with hearts instead of logic. But it was that same heart that built us, broke us, and made us endure. Remember this, fear is not born from cruelty. Fear is born from understanding what you cannot control, and you cannot control us, you never could." The transmission ended there, but its words carried across the void like wind through old ruins, settling into every world, every station, every heart. In the following days, the Galactic Union began to crumble not from war, but from awakening. The empires that had mocked Earth rewrote their history. Statues of old leaders were taken down. Museums that once displayed human relics as curiosities now covered them in glass and light, giving them the honor of saints. The Academy of Helion changed its syllabus, introducing a new subject called Terran Studies, and every child was taught the name of the blue world that once stood alone against the stars. On the world of Vorin Prime, a poet wrote a single line that spread across the galaxy. We laughed at silence until it spoke. Meanwhile, in the deep shadows of space, the Terran fleet began to withdraw, their ships vanishing into the black like whispers returning to dreams. No fanfare, no message, just disappearance, because they had no interest in ruling the galaxy. They had already ruled fear on the bridge of Erebus. Admiral Rhea stood before the viewport. The stars reflected in her eyes like the ghosts of old wars. Vega approached her quietly. "The Council has stood down, no fleets left. No more mockery," he said softly. "The galaxy is quiet." Rhea didn't answer for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the endless horizon. "It won't last," she said finally. "Peace never does. But they'll remember this silence for generations. And maybe that's enough," Vega nodded. "So what now?" Rhea turned away, her expression unreadable. "Now we go home. Humanity has no more enemies, only witnesses." She stepped closer to the central console and gave the final order. "Activate the veil, return to the deep." Outside, the great fleet began to vanish one by one, their hulls dissolving into shadow as cloaking fields expanded. The stars behind them flickered, and then the void swallowed them completely. Only the faint distortion of light remained, like ripples in water where something vast had passed. On the last signal from the Erebus, Alethia's calm voice spoke a final line that would be remembered in secret archives for centuries. "Humanity sleeps, but silence listens." Then even that voice faded, and the galaxy was left alone with its conscience. Years passed, then decades, and the galaxy changed. Wars grew fewer. Arrogance waned. Leaders began to speak with caution, and the word Terran became sacred, not spoken in jest but in reverence. Temples were built on some worlds dedicated to the Keepers of Silence, their priests wearing black robes marked with the circle and the dot. And when children asked what it meant, they were told, "It means never forget," on Yeltir, the same planet where laughter once filled the council chamber. A memorial now stood in its place, a single black monolith inscribed with the phrase, "We remember." And every year, under the light of 3 suns, a moment of silence was held. And no one dared break it, but far away beyond mapped space, the quiet sea of dark matter where light barely reached, something moved. A shadow the size of a continent gliding through eternal night. The Erebus, her engines quiet, her crew still vigilant. Humanity had not vanished again. They had simply stepped beyond reach. Watching, learning, waiting. The Admiral walked the bridge in silence, her face older, her eyes tired yet fierce. She looked at the stars and whispered, They think peace is the end. But peace is only the pause before the next lesson. Her crew said nothing. They didn't need to. They all understood, for they were the children of Earth, born in silence, shaped by memory, and bound by patience. Their mission never to dominate but to endure. Because humanity had learned the oldest truth of the universe, that survival is not won by strength, but by the will to wait until strength returns. And so the galaxy went on, living, thriving, fearing, but never again laughing at the name of Earth. And in that silence, something beautiful took root. Respect. Fragile and slow, but real. Each species began to question the arrogance they once carried. Some even sent pilgrimages to the Sol system. Though they never found it, the humans had hidden it well, folded behind space itself, untouchable and unseen. But those who searched said that sometimes, if you listened closely in the deep void, you could still hear it, the faint sound of a heartbeat echoing through the stars. Slow, patient, eternal, reminding them all that somewhere out there, the teachers of fear still watched from the shadows, waiting, silent and unbroken.